We're now going to tie the Clear Water Pupa, one of my favorite patterns to tie. It's a realistic Chironomid pupa pattern that works well in clear water or when fish are fussy and have seen an awful lot of beadhead patterns. So let's tie the Clear Water Pupa, one of my favorite patterns for clear water situations where your flies may have to be a little more realistic to fool fish, and especially in situations where fish have seen an awful lot of flies or fly fishermen and they're a little leery of beadhead patterns, to traditional Chironomid patterns people use today. So onto the hook I have tied, and this hook is a Mustad C49S number 10. Tie these from 10, 12, 14, even 16 if you like. And this is tied in an olive green. I tie in black, browns, clarets or maroon. Claret or maroon is a great Chironomid color because it can be taken for claret, it can be taken for brown, it can be taken for black. It just depends on the water and light conditions, how the fish actually perceive the fly when it's being fished. So I've covered the first 1/3 of the hook shank. I'm going to hold up my wire, in this case fine silver wire, along the side of the shank and secure that forward through what will end up to be the thorax area. And then we're going to come back and then secure the wire along the hook shank. And I'm kind of pulling on the wire away from the hook slightly. And what the net result of that is it tends to force the thread wraps, one wrap right next door to the other, so that there are no gaps. We're trying to build up a nice thread body that's ultra thin. The coating of the fly we put on after really adds to the bulk. So we've got that in place right down into the bend. We're going to put a small red butt on the fly. This is optional, but the residual hemoglobin often manifests itself right at the tip of the abdomen on many Chironomid species, so it's not a bad habit to mimic that. And I've just wound that forward a couple of wraps. I'm going to go a little further forward. I can unwind them so my thread's out of the way. And now we're just going to take that fine holographic mylar, the red holographic, makes excellent butt material, 3 or 4 times around. And then I just unwrap my tying thread, come up, a couple of wraps to tie off, trim away the excess, a little spin to take away the thread twist. Now we can make nice flat even wraps all the way up, and you can see how thin this body is. It's 2 wraps of thread basically going forward. Very thin bodies. You can overlap the thread wraps a little bit if you want to create a slight taper as you get near the abdomen area, but overall you want to keep this fly as thin as you can. Again, when you see the final body coating we put on this fly, that's what adds its illusion of bulk, if you will. So we've got the body complete. And you can use tying thread, it's probably the easiest, but there's other materials that make great bodies. Flashaboos, crystal flashes, frostbite, those kind of materials. Again, it's more dependent on the color that you want to create, and make sure whatever material you use doesn't add unnecessary bulk. So now we're going to take our wire ribbing, make 1 wrap right at the base of the butt to protect it, and then just start winding forward, open even turns all the way up to the tying thread. And we want to make sure that thread is hanging at the back of the body, sorry, the front of the body there, and then we're just going to come up a couple of wraps, and rather than break it off now, I'm actually going to pull the thread horizontal and secure it down the side of the thorax area so we can distribute our materials evenly around the shank, again helping to reduce bulk. We don't want to pile everything up in one spot. We're just kind of distributing it around, and then I've broken off the wire. Now we're going to tie in our shellback material, and again this is optional. You could use to have a regular thread thorax, or you can augment it a little bit with some of the Mirage tinsel, and I'm going to use small on this. I want just a thin sliver of flash, if you will, again to complement the overall skinny proportions we're going for here. So we're just going to come back slightly, secure that on top of the hook, and secure that right down out of the way. Again, clockwise spin of the bobbin takes that twist out. Back up and come back a little bit forward. Notice I'm keeping this head area nice and clear if you can. This is a fly you don't want to crowd the head because we've got some gills to go in that go in right at the very end. So the wing pads, you could use Mylar for the wing pads as well, but I like to use stretch floss, and the most common color I use is hot orange or a cinnamon amber color. You can use tan as well. Really want to get into it. Every time you see natural Chironomid pupa, make a mental note of their actual wing color, and then you can use the appropriate stretch floss to match it. And what I've done is I've taken this stretch floss, doubled it around the tying thread, grasped both ends. I have equal amounts of floss on either side of the tying thread here. I've doubled it around at the midpoint. I'm going to pull it underneath the shank of the hook, and then I am pulling as tight as I dare. Just pulling and pulling. You might even move the hook in the vise. I'm pulling so hard. We can always reposition it and secure that right back to the base of the thorax, right where the body is started. You can see I've got one length of material on the near side and one length of material over on the far side. And now we're just going to take our thread, spin it counterclockwise again, and wind that forward to build up a nice thorax. We can go back and forth a few times, but truthfully it's better to err on the side of skinny than building up an excessively big bulky thorax that you might regret later. I might go a little bit, a couple more wraps here. Again, spinning the thread makes wide, flat wraps that don't add a lot of bulk but have a lot of great coverage. So there we've got a nice thread thorax. Again, be sensitive not to crowd the head area of the fly. Now we're going to pull over the Mylar, across the back, a couple of wraps to secure, one in front to lock it, and then trim away the excess. And now we'll do these wing pads one at a time. The near side wing pad, I just pull up and across. It's diagonal. I pulled it across the top, so this wing pad comes up from the bottom and across. Couple of wraps to hold it, and we're going to do the same with the far side wing pad. Couple of wraps, and you can pull and wiggle on these a little bit. You can roll the fly over and make sure that the wing pads are secure as you like. And I pulled them with tension, but not super tight, because we're going to take a couple of wraps here and then pull on them and trim away the excess. If I pull the wing pad materials too tight, there's a risk that they will spring out from underneath the tying thread, and then you have to start the whole thorax process over again. So I've built up a little head right now, and we're going to stop, and now we're going to coat the fly. And to do that, we're going to use a thin coating clear fly finish in thin formula. It's got a nice brush applicator, and you want to do this in stages. You don't want to dollop it all on there all at once. So what we do is we just put a little bit on. And I usually do the thorax area first, and I will roll the fly upside down. Make sure I get it in the pocket where those wing pads are. There's a little pocket underneath, and we're just going to coat that. And I'm trying to stay, if I can, away from not too much on the head of the fly. So we'll sit that like that, and then we'll come in and we'll activate it using the UV light. It'll dry all nice and hard. Let that sit. And now we'll add a second coating. So we'll start, and this time you can coat the entire body. Fill that right in. This is, the English use a pattern called the epoxy buzzer. They use a lot of bead heads over there. In many instances they're banned. So they need a thin, slender fly that sinks very quickly. And these epoxy style buzzers do it. Now with these different finishes these days, so we can build that up. And just, again, this UV fly finish is just so great because it's just the right consistency to stay in place but not run all over the place. And if we don't like how things look, I'm starting to build up a little bit here, I can just sweep it forward into the thorax area, I can even roll the fly around a little bit and just let gravity work to help disperse the materials. And when I'm happy with it, give it a flash. Activate it. It takes just seconds to activate. Years ago, used to have to do this with multiple applications of clear nail polish or even rod winding epoxy, and of course there was a whole mixing of that up. You can see how that's caked right on there. So now we're going to tie in the gills. You could certainly whip finish the fly if you wanted right here, or you could have done that before applying the body coating and you would have been ready to go. But I like to add gills to my flies. It's a prominent feature on our chironomids here in North America that we see. So they're worthy of duplication. And to do that, I like to use the Uni Stretch in white. And all we're going to do is, I've trimmed off a short length of it. You can moisten it if you want to help keep it all together. And we're just going to come up on top and secure that right near the hook eye. Sort of 2 wraps on top, 1 wrap in behind, 1 wrap in front. A quick 2-turn whip finish. Don't need much. And then sort of twist all of the gills together and trim them about half the length of the thorax. And there you have a very realistic set of little gills. And the reason I tie the gills on now is that if you tie them on prior to coating the body, oftentimes these thin formulations can wick up those gills and they end up being all hard and they're not soft and fluffy. And all we can do now to help reinforce those last thread wraps in the tie-off area is just a little dab of brushable super glue, and that'll lock everything in place. And there you go, the Clear Water Pupa, an excellent pattern to use when fish are selective, either due to clear water where they're a little more sensitive to what a fly actually looks like, or in situations that lakes have seen just a ton of anglers and bead-headed patterns. I kind of got to know those bead-headed ones sting a bit and avoid them. So it's a great change-up pattern. You can tie it in a myriad of colors. You can take your favorite bead-head patterns and give them a clear water look to them by removing the bead and doing this realistic thorax. So there you go, one of my favorite chironomid patterns to tie. I hope you enjoy it and choose to add it to your fly box. I think it'll serve you well. So thanks for watching. For more information on fly fishing, and stillwater fly fishing in particular, including additional flies and tips, things like that that'll hopefully help you improve your stillwater fishing, please visit my website at flycraftangling.com. And you can also find me on Facebook and join in the conversation on Twitter. I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.